Hey everyone, welcome back to Waypoint Sports and Sports Adjacent podcast that sets out to disprove the notion that people with lives dedicated to pixels jumping across the screen can't also be unhealthily interested in what nerds condescendingly refer to as sports ball every Super Bowl. Rob, I start off every episode with the same question. Buddy, are the Bears back?
Well, you tell me. There's nothing to these rumors that they're going to deal Fields, right?
All right, so we just moved. All right, hold on. I'm taking this section in the notes. I am moving them up to topic A. The Bears have the number one pick in the draft. The draft is in April, I believe. Next major event is the Combine, where you have lots of college players come out and run sprints. And for some reason, they air it on ESPN because you got to put something else from football on it at all times. And yeah, the Bears have Justin Fields in his he'll be entering his third year, which is not where you want to be in a rebuilding team, in theory. That is not usually the timeline, but the Bears are in an unusual timeline as a franchise. And the thought is, with the number one pick, you can either trade back, which is what they're most likely to do, to say the Indianapolis Colts, who really want a quarterback, and acquire a bunch of draft picks and keep Justin Fields and see what you can get out of somebody who showed unbelievable promise as an athlete, but was not a particularly good passer for all sorts of reasons that could be very easily attributable to things not related to Justin Fields. Or do you reset the clock on the team entirely? Do you trade Justin Fields for probably 2 first-round picks, right? Like, I think he shows enough promise you would get something comparable to trading back for Fields. Take a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud or I forget, the Will Lewis, something like that, as one of the other quarterbacks in that top spot. And you essentially start the team in the place that you should be at, which is the first year of a rookie deal while you're building a team around a rookie. I think there's a logic to it. I think the reason I don't believe it'll happen is because every quarterback is a coin flip. Yep. And you don't know. The quarter is not fully formed on Justin Fields, but he kicked ass in some really important ways. He has the leadership qualities. He has the ability to suffer through 2 years of playing for the Chicago Bears and coming out the other side. And he was an incredible runner. And I think they can maybe figure out the rest in a way they could put together a fun and entertaining team. And starting over on a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud doesn't strike me as necessarily the best move. Well,
and there's always the so we've talked about this before, and this is true across a lot of different sports. You know, the way we phrase it from the fan perspective is, would you rather have a team that's good and in the hunt, as they say, every year, or would you rather have like one championship run that gets the job done? And I think we both sort of said we prefer to, it'd be nice to have a Bears team that you're kind of interested in seeing week in and week out. But I think the other side of this, if you're looking at it from the team perspective, is I think it's very easy to get caught up, and I think it actually serves front office executives quite well to create this notion that, well, obviously, everything that matters depends on that like rookie deal clock, the 5-year clock. You gotta, if the window isn't right, it's time to blow it up.
Right? This is not how NFL teams have been organized historically. This is a new phenomenon from those recent collective bargaining agreement that created this kind of window where with college athletes coming in more prepared than ever, running more NFL-like systems in high school and college, they're able to hit the ground running faster. And the thought is, you want to maximize the 5-year window where you're paying them the least, where you're paying them somewhere between, $10 and $30 million, as opposed to, I think Burrow and what's the Chargers quarterback? Why am I blanking on it? Anyway, they're going to sign new deals. They're going to be $50+ million.
Yeah, which is a huge chunk of your salary cap, because like the salary cap has competitive functions, but it is a wage suppression mechanism. And quarterbacks have the highest market value, and even they can only realize like a pretty decent fraction of it. But even they like can't quite get paid what they would make like on a free market. But what that means is to like if you have a star quarterback, there's a little bit of a curse that comes with them, because what it takes to keep them in town means that you don't have money to spend on other positions. So often you have like the star who's surrounded by a diminishing cast of talent because there's simply not enough freedom on the salary cap to allow them to be sort of armed with the team around them that they need. However, like where I started going with this is, you know, you can see it'd be very tempting if you were a front office executive to be like, well, hold on, we're rebuilding this whole thing. The timeline, don't think about this year, don't think about next year, think about 5 years from now. And it's like, if you were to blow it up, as they say with the Bears, like you are basically investing now in a theoretical, like it's supposed to work out this way, right? Like if we blow it up, surely we will get a decent, cheap quarterback in that mix. And with the draft picks, you'll have a fairly cheap team that you can augment with free agent talent, and you can build them to compete in that rookie contract window. But as we've seen, like quarterbacks are it's hard to see how they work out. And also there's something to be said for good teams develop like an institutional competence that serves you well over time. And if you don't do that, if you stay in the like, we're gonna blow it up again and start from scratch, you kind of don't. You're having to lay the foundations all over again. You could easily end up in a position years from now, in the same position the Bears were when they got Fields, which was you had an elite prospect and a team that was a shambles. Like he was stepping into a mess. And so even if the window, even if this like sort of forecloses the possibility of a Super Bowl, I would sure as hell take maybe a slightly disappointing career for Fields, where like it's some playoff appearances and some good seasons, but like they're an exciting, fun team. And in years to come, you know, you're looking at a different era under a different quarterback. But in the meantime, the ship is righted. And all this notion of maybe restart the program scares the hell out of me, because like I don't like it would make me nervous with any franchise, but with the Bears it's like you don't have credibility on this front. I'm like, maybe the new regime there is really great. There've been mixed signs, but just institutionally the Bears are not good at this part of the game.
No, and I think they need to prove, like, if Fields is incompetent or doesn't show some sort of meaningful leap this coming season, the Bears are also going to be bad again. And the draft class next year is supposed to be much better than the draft class this year. They'll be in a position through trading back, not trading Fields, to find out what he is capable of, because this will be even if they don't give him a number one wide receiver, because it's very difficult. The free agent class is bad. The Chase Claypool thing hasn't really worked out so far. You'll have your opportunity to do exactly what you're talking about, Rob, which is you can reset the clock more naturally once you give Fields an actual opportunity to fail on his own terms, as opposed to as a result of circumstances that set him up to fail. And he didn't even manage to do that. Like, this is a team that should have won 0 games. They should have gone 0-6. Like, if you had a Nathan Peterman or the other like quarterbacks they were fielding like as backups for Fields, who don't even share his play style, if they were playing for that same team, I struggle to imagine them winning more than a single game. And even that would have been a fluke. So 3 games in which they also lost something like 7 or 8 games, plus or minus 1 score. Like, it's very easy to flip the math on that, and they like accidentally have 7 or 8 wins. I just don't know how you can hold that against Fields. And so if Poles and Eberflus want their own guy, go get him next year. If Fields turns out to just be, if he lives up to this moniker of he's a quarterback that's actually a running back, like, we'll find out this year. And then
but also even that, I'm like, then make it work. Like, right. They said that about Lamar Jackson, and guess what? Like, Harbaugh managed to figure it out and create like a winning combination around that, because if he's a quarterback who's mostly running back, but he's an incredible running back, then that is a really difficult quarterback for a team to deal with, and you should
run his
build
ass
around
into the
that.
ground, right?
Yeah.
Like treat him like a running back and get 5 good seasons out
Cam
of him.
Newton's going to go to the Hall of Fame on that style of career, and based on like what the flashes of a field shows, he will do the same. And it seems like he's in it to play that way. So it's not even like, you're using him up, because this is just his natural style. That he this is how he approaches the game of football. But yeah, I just don't.
It's also interesting because I think the Bears keep Fields. The funny thing about this entire conversation is that it would be much more complicated if Bryce Young, the sort of consensus number one, although with the way I've heard this quarterback class talked about, is a bit of a choose your own adventure, which works to the advantage of the Bears, where there's a lot of players with different types of traits that you can talk yourself into. But if Bryce Young had 6 more inches on him, he would be like a Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Luck. Like, the Bears would toss Fields in the trash and move on. But he's shorter than Kyler Murray. And that has proven to be there's a lot of worries around shorter quarterbacks. Look at Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray. Like, they're more injury prone. They tend to be very not have enough weight on them. So,
but
like,
the big issue is opening
NFL,
the visual lanes
yes.
through, because the thing is, in the NFL, if you don't watch the game that much, they talk about the trench warfare of the offensive and defensive line play, but every play begins with 8 large men or more rearing up in front of you and grappling. And that is just a wall of people that ideally, and this is why quarterbacks keep getting taller, you can just sort of see over. And you can sort of see what's happening downfield. But we're talking, you don't even have to be that short before it starts to cause problems. At this point, being just flat 6 feet makes front office recruiters nervous, because
Fields isn't even short, but there were times that even he got himself into trouble over the course of the season where he would do these jump ball throws where he would kind of leap into the air and try and pitch it forward. And the vast majority of the time it did not go well. That's why you want that natural height to just be able to toss it over, as opposed to playing with in the realm of physics.
And so you'll see teams do weird things. It's almost like they're trying to create plays that bring back the Madden vision cone from back in the day, where it's they'll try to scheme it so the offensive line will open holes, not for a run, but so that the quarterback can stand there and get some sort of glimpse of the routes that are supposed to be unfolding downfield. Otherwise, you're having that quarterback roll out a lot to try and get around the line and see what's happening. And then they better be fast, and they better be good throwing on the run. So yeah, it's not necessarily disqualifying. There's some great quarterbacks who, don't have that height, but it does tend to create some complications that may or may not be capable of being overcome.
Yeah, so there'll be lots to talk about with the Bears in the weeks and months to come. They are sort of in the driver's seat of a lot of the offseason. They have the most money to spend, although as part of a pretty weak free agent class, so I wouldn't be shocked if they weren't huge spenders. Some of the major players that were hopefully going to be on the market, a tackle for the Chiefs, Orlando Brown Jr. sounds like he's going to get tagged. Damian Payne, I think that's right, was a defensive end over on the Commanders, is also likely to get tagged. And so a lot of the big flashy free agents, which is normally what happens. Players like to keep their good players, and they find ways to keep them, especially as the salary cap continues to rise. But we'll have plenty to talk about with the Bears in the weeks to come, as sports and the NFL, despite being in its offseason, manages to dominate the sports calendar all year long through its various stunts and phases. But we should at least touch on a conclusion to our previous episode, which was a preview of the Super Bowl with Austin Walker. I will say this: Austin did not have the tragedy unfold. At the end of that podcast, I asked Austin to outline what would be the worst possible scenario for losing this game, which was Jalen Hurts throwing a pick six at the very end to sort of lose the game completely on his shoulders, to go into the offseason in which you would probably lose a bunch of coaches and also have huge questions at quarterback, leading to just a really messy Super Bowl hangover that could kind of weigh the team down for years to come. Jalen Hurts was sick in this game. He was everything. Whatever you asked him to do, He did. He was incredible to watch. He did not even lose the game. The Mahomes just ran the clock out and gave Hurts no time to do much of anything. But I don't know how you couldn't have come out of that game more impressed with a extremely young quarterback in Jalen Hurts and excited about what he could do in the future.
It was one of the best Super Bowl games I've seen in my life. Up until
the last 5 minutes, just like watching a balloon slowly deflate, like, brrr, like I get the tactic of running out the clock, giving them no time to play. I get it, but it was otherwise like a picture perfect, exciting Super Bowl, and all I wanted was to give Hurts a minute 15 to make something happen.
Yep, but the problem was, and as I thought more about it, the Eagles defense had been very good across a lot of this year, and they weren't able, and hey, no shame in this necessarily. A lot of teams can't stop Kansas City, but they couldn't either when it was the most important game of the year, and so yes, things end up hinging on a sort of they feel like they end up hinging on a pass interference call at the end of the game. A holding call. Sorry.
Yeah.
But even as that play unfolded in real time, to me, I saw the hold immediately. I was like, oh, that could be a problem. Like a Eagles player basically grabbed a Kansas City receiver before he could start his route. And then by the time the guy got released, it was just in time to see the ball land in an empty spot on the field where the route should have been completed.
Which is common. Like the notion that like officiating in any sport is just trying to catch the big stuff. Like infractions are happening on purpose or by accident all the time. And you are just sort of trying to maintain some sort of competitive balance so the game can be played. And frequently, players are just trying to get away with shit. Like this, playoff Super Bowls are also officiated differently, in which, like, broadly speaking, the officials are going to give players more leeway to be more physical and aggressive with one another relative to sort of a regular season game. And I think it was Bradbury was the cornerback for the Eagles, admitted after the game. He's like, yeah, I held him. I was hoping they wouldn't call it, which was like remarkably... It sort of took a lot of the air out of what otherwise was going to be an enormous talking point. I'm sure as an Eagles fan, you're still looking at that and going, like, trying to pull your hair out.
We were saying it's a soft call, which it kind of was. Like, it wasn't there's more egregious stuff, but it was noticeable. It wasn't nothing.
Correct. Like, when you saw the replay, it was pretty obvious that he tugged. And what the player there is trying, like, frequently what players are trying to do is, if they get beat, a hold is a way of preventing a worse play from happening. So the difference between...
And ironically... They should have let the worst play happen because it would have been a touchdown. They would have gotten the ball back with a minute.
They would have gotten time back. Right.
Yep.
So what ends up happening is the hold, and then they're able to just run the ball. They get one of their running backs, like, does, what is a relatively recent thing, which is like knowing to not score the touchdown and to slide down inbounds right in front of the goal line so you can just suck the rest of the life out of the clock. And you're right. Because there are situations where teams are taught a defense will line up like towards the goal line and they will let a running back score a touchdown because it is more advantageous to give the team an attempt to respond than it is to let them bleed the clock.
Yeah, this has been the big change. Is it used to be that it required, like, it was only when the kneel down play was the option that you would see sort of games like fizzle like this, and just a team was sort of in a submission hold and slowly choked out. Now you see them doing stuff like this more, where they pick up like the yardage they need for the first down to get a new set of downs where they can just like kneel down, but the player will, instead of scoring, like hit the dirt, and at that point the game is up. And yeah, this is sort of a tweak, and I don't know, it's not the worst idea if in years to come the NFL's like, you can't do that. Like, they came through and like the officials see a guy throw himself to the turf, just before the end zone at the end of a game. It's just like, no, we're giving you the 7, and
it's tough. I don't know how you would legislate that out of the game, because in some ways, what's remarkable about it is it runs contrary to the dream of even playing the sport, right? So that running back, I don't know which one who did that slide at the very end, but ostensibly the reason you get into any of this outside of, like questions like escaping your own personal circumstance through sport, is to be in the big game and to score the touchdown.
Well,
like
it's
that,
the classic presence of mind stuff. Like knowing,
right, and knowing it's a team game, right? Is that like the difference between winning and losing is that slide. I mean, obviously it's Patrick Mahomes, obviously it's Andy, but in that moment, it is that player being unselfish and recognizing the thing to do is to not get the touchdown and is to be 2 yards short and to let everything else play out. And I'm sure there's still, obviously you get the ring and the celebration, but man, like you're also got to be rewinding in your head. Like I also could have just gone those 2 yards and like gotten a touchdown in the Super Bowl touchdown. My whole team would be yelling at me, but there'd be some sick ass photos that I get to hang on my wall.
Yeah, it's a bit like when a team is on their fourth down and they throw it long. Defensive backs need to not catch that ball. They can knock it to the ground, but they need to not intercept it. But like everything in your conditioning is like, I need to catch this ball. See ball, get ball. The other thing is, and this was the thing that I really took away from all of this, is it can feel like Mahomes' ability and talent and genius for football is overstated. It can feel that way. Like nobody can be that good. It's just a talking point. This was the game where it was like, nope, I think we all just need to bow before the king. I really thought that he was debilitatingly hurt heading into this game. And there were certainly signs that like his leg was not right. He was playing through considerable pain at the end of the first half.
He re-injured it. That looked like the kind of thing that, Rob, you and I are bedridden for 8 weeks. I mean, it's unbelievable. Not only the physical talents, but his ability to mentally adapt his own physicality to like the way his body is changing, which is, again, like to your point of, you are taught to do certain things. Instinctually, this has led you here. Oh no, I need to play the game completely differently in order to win. That's a talent.
He has a couple times in this run, he was basically effectively playing on one leg, and he looked weird and different doing it, but like he was making it work. But then in this game and the previous one, when the chips were down and he needed to like just go hard on that leg as if it weren't hurt, despite the fact we all knew it was, he did it. Like it was like we praise grittiness a lot, and there's times where like playing through pain is really not worth it. But Super Bowl is one of those things where it's like, all on the line, everything to play for, and he did it. Like there was in addition to like his pure talent at the game and his complete mastery of like its tactics and the flow of each play, there is also an element of he can do things by sheer act of like force of will. He can just like power himself through things that a lot of other players like can't, right? There's a lot of players who, it's not because they're less tough, but they just can't figure out how to play in that situation, right? The Bears notably had a quarterback that exited an important game with a leg injury, and it was always sort of a black mark against him. But the question was always, he felt like Jay Cutler, when he hurt his knee, felt like he could not throw for shit with that leg being wobbly. And there's a lot of quarterbacks who sort of agree that like when things are not right, everything else kind of falls apart. And Mahomes is just like, very well, I will use different mechanics and a different play style and like skin these guys alive.
I will defeat you. You that way. And it's equally amazing. I mean, there are 2 touchdowns in that game that the Chiefs scored that have nothing to do with Patrick Mahomes. Players came wide open, kind of like splitting left. And Rob, you and I could have thrown that ball. We could have scored those touchdowns. It is, there's a lot of bemoaning in Chicago sports circles over the fact that the Bears were interested in Mahomes, took meetings with Mahomes, and ultimately not only didn't take Mahomes, but traded up to take Mitch Trubisky, who is essentially going to not quite flame out, but I think become nothing more than a backup in the league. There are worse fates.
Still a pretty great career and great life, honestly.
Yes, worse fates for your bank account, but not necessarily the flashiest thing in the world. And, I try to imagine, like, Rob, can you if they had drafted Patrick Mahomes, John Fox would have been coaching him. Now, granted, that probably flames out. I think Mahomes is enough of a talent that it would have been recognized that Fox was not getting the most out of him. He would have been fired. But there's also there's also absolutely a window into a world in which he keeps Fox around in like a McCarthy sort of situation where it's like, hey, like, well, don't if it ain't broke, don't try and fix it. It's like maybe we end up with a like lower top 10 quarterback who's like pulls off occasional amazing feats of strength, but never gets paired with someone like an Andy Reid who is just using him to like his utmost ability in a way that just would not happen in any other circumstance.
The Mahomes goes to Chicago counterfactual is something I think a lot about. I've sort of been on the record. I've talked about before that if Chicago somehow drafts Mahomes, because Mahomes was also kind of buried treasure in that draft.
Yes.
Like both teams had a sort of similar idea, which is we've identified somebody other people have overlooked, and we see greatness in him. The Bears were wrong, and the Chiefs were very right. But I've always sort of suspected that if Mahomes had come to Chicago, he would have been ruined. That it would have been a similar story where whatever his play style is, they would have tried to force him into whatever style their shitty coach, be it a Nagy or be it a Fox type character, would have adopted. But at this point, I have seen enough that, like, when I talk about like Mahomes has a genius for the game, like I do mean that literally. Like he has a thing where he sees the game and understands it on a really intuitive level that I think might have been unruinable, even for the Bears' like prodigious talents at ruining like any good passer or receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think, there is a world where, despite the Bears having done nothing right and deserving nothing out of Mahomes, he ends up having a really successful profile there and ends up saving a mediocrity and maybe a chain of mediocrities. Maybe they figure out Fox isn't the guy, but then they make another bad hire.
Yeah.
And that could be a curse too. I think, why can't I remember the Chargers quarterback name?
Justin Herbert.
Justin Herbert and Kyler Murray had a little bit of this too, where things go a little bit well. And what do you know? The front office and the organization decide everybody's doing an incredible job. Fantastic work. Extensions all around.
The Cardinals extended their coach and their GM under like 3 to 4 year, tens of millions of dollar deals, and then fired both of them in the ensuing offseason.
It was like 1 year with the extension, and they extended like I think Murray in all of that too. It was like just across the board, like everybody's doing fantastic. And the thing was, there's still reasons to have concerns about like Murray's long-term viability as a quarterback, but I watched a fair bit of the Cardinals that year, and to me it was pretty clear that Murray was sometimes making magic happen.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no magic being called in from the sidelines, and there wasn't like a lot of magic around him. And so, it's one of those things where a good quarterback can transform an organization, but also it gives a lot of people an excuse to like congratulate themselves and be like, we did it. We nailed it. We're going to ride this incredibly talented person. And it should, because they're incredibly talented and we're winning, we must be doing something right too.
The last thing I'll make about the Super Bowl is, tragedy unfolded. Well, actually, tragedy unfolded in two ways. One, my daughter for the third year in a row got the coin flip wrong. So I keep trying to find different ways to fund her going to college as expenses go up, and for $50 each year, she keeps picking the wrong side of the coin. That said, she got lucky this year because right after she got the coin flip wrong, which is like the only thing all the children came down to watch was to see if Jessica got the coin flip right, and then she did not. Was immediately I won a we play. There's a game you can play frequently that you'll play like with a group of people when you're watching the Super Bowl where the square game. So you're like, you put in a pool of money and then you randomly get a space on a square. And so like, let's say at the end of the first quarter, if the score is 14-14, the winning square is 8 because you add up 14-14, get 28. And so 8, oh, you win. That's just an arbitrary way of handing out money as a goofy way for a group game. I won that on the first quarter. And then as I'm going up the stairs to help my kid with something, my wife wins a TV commercial bingo that we were also playing. And so the $50 got erased pretty quickly. But then the thing that went poorly, and this is a comment we got from, this made me think of it, was a comment from a reader that said, quote, "My wife made sliders for the Super Bowl and the meat tasted like meatloaf." They didn't elaborate further. That's the only comment we got.
Yeah.
But it definitely sounded derogatory, right? I don't think the sliders are supposed to taste like meatloaf. What do we think they were supposed to taste like?
So my guess is my guess, like, I make pretty good meatloaf, and I don't know that a slider having that flavor is the worst thing in the world, but I can imagine it might have an over minced texture. So that instead of like that good, like chewy ground beef, it's a bit more, like in the mincing and mixing process of making a meatloaf or meatball. Sometimes, they can end up feeling, especially if they're overworked, a little like meat pasty. But the other thing is a lot of people put in like lots of onions and other seasonings, into these things that can be a little bit not what you want in a burger or a slider.
My wife made so this is something we've encountered. The Super Bowl for the last couple of years is something we have now watched with a neighbor, a fairly large group of people. And this is not a dynamic I have experienced in the past, because usually when I've watched the game, it's either been a pretty small group of people, or maybe I'm going somewhere and the food has been like catered and you're just like pitching in money to cover like the lunch or dinner being brought in. There's like a real specific Thanksgiving style timing element to when you should be putting in your food. Last year, famously at the same gathering, someone brought some food, put it in the oven too late, and by the time it came out, it was like halfway through the fourth quarter, and nobody had any appetite. So it's just like a bunch of food they made. It looked delicious, and nobody wanted to eat it. And my wife did a double. She put in her delicious buffalo chicken sliders far too late into the second quarter, or into the second half. Yeah. And not only was it too late after a bunch of people had gotten digging deep on all sorts of other entree and appetizer menus, they came out awfully burnt. Now, the center of it was fine, but the tops were extremely burnt. She had put it up too high in the oven and had not really accounted for that. And so she comes out with like 40 these sliders she spent like all afternoon making, and like they're all burnt tops. 5 minutes left in the game, and she's like, "Does anyone want any?" And I'm like, "Yep, I do. I want 4. I want 4 of these delicious."
And so does everyone
sliders.
else. Grab a slider. Grab a slider. You're all getting sliders.
No, nobody else touched them. We ended up just like slicing the tops off, and exposing some of the bread and handing out some of them to people as they left. But it was I just hadn't quite, it was a lesson learned that, she thought third quarter people are going to be ready for more. And it turns out you got kind of by halftime, I think all the main foods have to be out, or you're running the risk of having spent your time on something that people are not, especially if it's something filling, right? If it is sort of an additive, a side thing, I think maybe you've got an opportunity to still catch some people towards the end of the game. But once you're drifting into 8 o'clock, depending on, what part of the country you live in, that's dangerous territory for a huge stack of food.
I don't know how it is. Like, and it's easy to think too, like, I'm not college age anymore. Like, it used to be like, at a Super Bowl party or something when I'm like 25 or something, it is like, hell yeah, that looks good. I'll have more. Hey, give me another beer and I'm going to fill another plate and just go for it. And like, that would have no impact. I was like, yeah, I feel fine. Like, what a fantastic night. Like, really feasting here. And now it's like, oh, my tummy feels full. And if I ate more, I would feel really unwell really fast if I did that. So now I'm not going to. Like, and that didn't used to be a thing where it's like, you have that notion of I forget where this comes from. Is it like from The Hobbit or something? The notion of like a dessert stomach, where it's like little kid thing, right? Where it's like, no, I'm full. Well, then you don't want cake? No, I have room for cake.
Yeah.
There's the treat stomach, right? I don't really have one anymore. It's more like, okay, no, you've had enough. Like you like if you eat any more, you're going to get a bit of like stomach ache or something. So you just can't. And I suspect just all of our friend groups are aging. Mm-hmm. And I think we still lay out parties. Like, we learned we had to 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But the party needs have changed.
Yeah. Like now the party is like, there are kids. People can only have 2 or 3 beers because they're driving home. It's
the third quarter. Do you have some still water? I could really crush some still water, please. No, not too cold.
I think that's a fair point. I have to make a quick phone call, and we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the XFL, some other sports news. Rob and I both watched 2 games. I cannot believe I don't think we can do it after this, Rob. We'll get there, but we'll answer some of your questions. We'll be right back. Rob, we watched the XFL. The XFL debuted. The new XFL debuted on ESPN this weekend. The XFL is a alternative sports league, football league that started in 2001. It was originally like a WWE NBC kind of joint venture. Chicago did have a team back then, the Chicago Enforcers. In the Wikipedia page, there is a photo of them playing at Soldier Field. Which, frankly, if the new XFL had a Chicago team, I might have. Maybe this is Lori Lightfoot's solution. Rob is just going to be trying to like recruit Dwayne Johnson to put a Chicago XFL team in there, and that'll fix everything. The original plan was to purchase the Canadian Football League, the CFL, which is now a fairly thriving league to our north. That didn't obviously happen. The original XFL. It's kind of like this WWE NFL hybrid. I didn't watch any of these games back in 2001. I was mostly just kind of reading and looking at clips. But they did more of the performative stunts and bits that you would associate with the WWE. I guess this took place specifically during the Attitude Era of the WWE. So like that was also like the height of when I was paying attention to wrestling. Probably, I think that was like Goldberg and Hulk Hogan's like heel turn to the NWO. Like that is a lot of that era of wrestling, trying to infuse kind of an NFL blitz quality to the NFL. It was a enormous failure. Everyone loses money. The XFL goes away until 2020. Vince McMahon just timing everything perfectly to debut the XFL's resurgence right as the NFL season finishes, and then COVID begins. The XFL does not make it more than 5 weeks in before not only is attendance and viewership down at a time when everyone is just at home, being they're desperate for anything to watch, but the COVID concerns in terms of like athletes and spread, like forced them to essentially abruptly stop the league 5 weeks in. They did not finish the season. They fired everybody and immediately go into bankruptcy. And that is the end of the XFL in 2020. And what gets us to today is the XFL was going to go in an auction, like the rights to the league or whatever, were going to go up into just a broader IP auction. And then Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and a group of others got together, bought it prior to the auction and brought it back, sort of repositioning the XFL not as a like extreme sports league, but like the whole rhetorical pitch, if you watch like the opening segments before a game starts, is like, hey, this is like a second chance. This is an opportunity for players who maybe were either undrafted or like kind of aged out of their prime or got overlooked, like a way to get back into a league that they are no longer a part of. And that is sort of the pitch for this several weeks of the XFL. There were 6 teams. I think all the games, well, they all played this week. I thought there were only 4 games. I don't know how they're doing the scheduling, but I watched 2 of these games, Rob, and I think there are interesting things to talk about in terms of the rule differences. But where I want to start is with the beer snake.
Okay.
So the beer snake is I don't think this is you were positioning it as perhaps a tradition of the XFL DC Defenders. I don't think that's true.
Well, so I had so the thing is, you mentioned we got to with beer snake, and I was like, what the fuck is a beer snake?
Oh, so you're unfamiliar with the concept to begin with.
No, I totally whiffed that people were doing this in stadiums. That people were
it's a problem. It's not encouraged. The beer snake is a thing.
It's where you're taking your empty plastic cups and stacking them together, and you got a tall enough stack. It begins to bend and turn like a snake. You sort of it becomes like a long tube, and people can just keep adding to it. And I guess so. This is. So I was looking up why you were talking about a beer snake. What was it? Because it came up around the DC Defenders game, and apparently in the previous iteration of the XFL, there was an epic beer snake at a Defenders game. And so, at least in the article, saying it's like, and the DC Defenders have a team tradition of beer snakes. And I was like, how is that possible? The league has been going for a week.
I mean, it's one of the problems with the beer snake is, outside of the potential sanitary issues, is Rob, when you're drinking these beers and then attaching it to the snake, there's a decent chance there's still some beer in there. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sure that people are drinking to the last drop. So it's easy to imagine you have this ever-growing, like, unsanitary snake that is, I'm sure, extremely funny if you're 4 to 5 beers in. And it is funny conceptually to the outside observer. But I can imagine a scenario where the beer snake is snaking towards you, and you're just getting hit with extra beer, flowing on you.
If you're going to an XFL game, you've signed up for this, right? It's like, it's like.
Okay, hold on, Rob.
I never thought I'd get sprayed with Faygo at this insane clown posse concert. Ew.
There is an article at the. What is as.com? What is this website? as.com with there's a subhead in here in this article. Why is the beer snake not allowed in the XFL? And the subhead is the tradition begins. So what exactly is a beer snake? Fans collect empty plastic cups of beer and stack them up initially vertically and make the stack dance as a snake charmer would. The beer snakes can get longer and span several rows as people team up with others and connect their creations to elongate the snake. The one that fans created in March 2020 in the Defenders game against the St. Louis Battlehawks ran the length of Audi Field end zone seats. Two groups banded together to create a snake that needed more than 1,200 cups emptied and almost 20,000 ounces of beer guzzled. So I think this is it. I think I am sending you a link right here to the old XFL, and there are people just shouting, "We got cups! We got cups!" as they are elongating this beer snake. There appear to be captains associated. There's a sign that says "Cup Snake starts here," and people are coming down, adding to the cup snake as the game is going on. I guess the DC Defenders are a holdover team. I don't think all the teams are exactly the same between the two of these, but we, halfway through this video that we are watching, Rob, I mean, this is moving its way from the front row all the way towards the back. It's truly incredible. This is a feat of engineering, of community. I don't know who this is, but halfway through the video, 46 seconds, Rob, you'll notice there appears to be a white guy in a fancy business suit who I would associate with being an owner or an executive associated with the league, takes a beer cup, walks from the field over, hands it to the beer snake fans to add to it, thus validating the beer snake as a tradition of the DC Defenders. And I should note, this video comes from the DC Defenders official Twitter account, which I don't know if it's still being updated. Does Twitter ownership transfer to The Rock? It's time to hashtag defend DC. Yes, this has transferred over. And this tweet does still exist. But, so Sports Illustrated, also, they just got gutted. Tons of writers there just lost their jobs, like, as part of an ongoing, bludgeoning of media jobs. So sucks for a lot of what's happening over there. But let me read for this article from Carl Rasmussen. Fans at Sunday night's XFL game in Washington between the DC Defenders and Seattle Sea Dragons were not pleased when security took away their beer snake. After security confiscated the coalition of cups at Audi Field in DC, fans responded in bizarre fashion by launching lemons onto the field. Exactly where the lemons came from remains unclear.
I was wondering this.
But the disgruntled Defenders supporters didn't hold back when pelting the fruits onto the playing field as they booed security. ESPN's commentators were left befuddled as a barrage of lemons cascaded onto the turf. Then they explained the situation with the beer snake, which apparently is a tradition among DC's XFL fan base. Defenders fans clearly hold the beer snake tradition in high regard, and the fact that the stadium shut down their fun so early in the season did not sit well with those in attendance. And I was watching this game and saw this play out in real time. The commentators were on the side of the audience. It was amazing because this is not usually usually when things go, you have like a streaker or somebody sneaks onto the field, or go do a Google search for New England Patriots dildos. And I swear I'm not sending you to a branded dildo page, but there was a game where people were throwing big floppy dildos into the end zone. And there's a specific tweet you can find that shows two refs unsure what to do with this giant sex object that was on the field. And they're sort of just kicking it like off to the side, not wanting to pick it up and touch it. But usually when that happens, the cameras cut away. The commentators don't talk about it. The thought is that, I think is that, we're endorsing it by we're encourage copycats. Whereas the XFL here was like, free the snake. Like, let the people drink, let the snake dance. And it was the most charming part about the 3 hours of XFL that I caught in 15-minute chunks over the course of the weekend.
Well, see, this is the thing. If the XFL is going to have to make these things fun to attend for reasons other than football. Because the football was bad.
It was really bad.
And it is, there's a couple things going on, and this is why, creating these leagues is so hard. It's not just that you're tons of great players can't make it in the NFL. But the problem is, you need to be recruiting from players who really do, they're not even making it out to NFL practice squads, because anyone who is marginal in that way will hang closer to the NFL and try to shoot their shot there. And they're that's
their version of XFL. There is no developmental league, but where the fringes of the NFL players exist are, yes, on the practice squad, where you are paid complete dirt, but have an opportunity to maybe move up due to an injury or
or you just distinguish yourself. Coaches take a shine to you, and they're like, wait, actually, you show you got some game and a good attitude. You'll be an asset to the locker room where we'll bring you in for a game or two and see how it goes. So you're it's not just you're dealing with players who are not of caliber to make the final cut roster. You're dealing with players who aren't quite up to snuff to make it on the practice squad. And then the other thing, and the broadcasts were at pains to point this out, because it seemed like they knew that this was going to be a lot of bad football. These teams have only been together for 5 weeks. And so they don't know how to play together. Their playbooks are very basic.
The first time they were hitting at all was going to be on the field in this game. And it's true that over time, the NFL, through its different contractual negotiations, has removed a lot of hitting in practices, in scrimmages during the off season or training camp and in between. And during the season broadly, players don't hit each other in practice because you don't want to cause any opportunity for injury that doesn't already exist in the violent game that football is when it's played on Sundays. But this is even a more where you have a lack of team cohesion, chemistry, and extremely can there be diamonds in the rough? I believe Taylor Heineke came out of who was the Commanders quarterback that was not particularly good, but wasn't any worse than sort of like the average C tier quarterback you get in the league. I don't think he came out of the XFL, but I think he came out of USFL. I don't know, but he came out of one of the alternative leagues.
Well, so this is the thing, like, because you and I are gonna have to keep an eye out for USFL because that football was considerably better last year than the XFL is right now. And I suspect that will be true this year as well. Like USFL feels like a more credible alternative league, a little bit closer to like college standards and like, you know, semi-pro standards than the XFL felt. Now, maybe that'll tighten up, but it definitely felt like the two games I watched, it was like the DC game and Seattle, the Kraken thing.
The DC played
who was the other team? Battlehawks. I watched Battlehawks.
Sure, yeah, the Battlehawks.
Atlanta
I couldn't tell you.
Battlehawks.
I watched two of them.
But it felt like offenses weren't very good throughout all this, and a big part of that was the offensive lines were kind of lost out there, and defenses were finding it very easy to round up these plays because in a big sloppy game of football, again, the whole like see ball, get ball ethos gets very powerful. And a defense doesn't need to have quite the same level of cohesion if it's amateur hour on offense. Because at that point, it's like they're going to put that ball somewhere and we just need to run down the guy who's going to get it because there's not sophisticated plays that they're running. So yeah, it was not good football. So I think if the USFL is going to make a go of this, it's going to have to be like, this is a fun event to come attend.
Right.
And it'll be because of stuff like it's fun to be in the end zone with the beer snake people.
Right. Which Vince McMahon is a huge piece of shit. But the notion of, hey, people like football. What if we gave them football that was exaggerated and like leaned in to the NFL is frequently called the no fun league for a reason. Like they are constantly trying to tamper down a lot of the excitement and like player improv that is much more prominent in other sports leagues. And so there is a window for, hey, I'm going to watch some lesser football because all the elite talent exists in football, like in the NFL, right? So I know that I'm not here to watch like a secret Patrick Mahomes, like just slip through everyone's fingers. Like that just doesn't really happen. But if I'm here to watch something different and interesting, but what they're pitching is, hey, these players, this could be their stepping stone to live the dream again. It's like, well, then that broadly means I'm watching a bunch of, more power to them. Like I'm sure that's got like to spend your whole life and, bounce around between 7 teams before you just kind of don't play football anymore. Like that sucks. I'm sorry that your career didn't go the way you were hoping. But ultimately means like it's a collection of players. Like AJ McCarron is one of the quarterbacks here. He was a backup to Andy Dalton. And why do I want to watch him throw the football? I don't. What I will say is, and some of the what has always been interesting about these alternative leagues are their kind of rule changes and like proposing what are ways that the NFL could change to make it more interesting, and in some ways more safe. So one of I'll line a couple of them here that are kind of the major changes. One, there's no field goals after a touchdown. You can kick a field goal, but after you score a touchdown, you can score up to 3 points. You can score 1 point by running a play from the 2-yard line, 2 points from the 5-yard line, or 3 points from the 10-yard line, which I don't ever expect the NFL to adapt something like that, but it did. If the league was more talented, like that would be interesting. Yes. Do that in preseason or something. Like the people forget the 3-point line didn't always exist in basketball. Like it was an addition to basketball, and I'm kind of all for like this is one of those rules that like I think it feels so goes against the core of what football is. I don't agree with that, but I can just see this being too hard of a change. I can imagine maybe some way of adding a way to score a different point level, like where you were going back 15, 20 yards, but I can't imagine them like ditching the field goal entirely. How else would cowardly coaches get by if they were forced to actually run a play instead of to kick the extra point? The really egregious fumble into the end zone rule in the NFL that drives everybody up a wall when it happens because it's a bad rule. The way it works is that let's say you're running for a touchdown and a defender tackles you and the ball fumbles in the normal field of play, goes into the end zone, and then goes out of the end zone. I think it can also touch the pylon. I think the pylon also qualifies as out of the end zone. That is not, you might imagine to yourself, well, it was a fumble, and if the offense recovered it, like, I don't know, put them back 10 yards. No, actually, you lose possession of the ball. It's a touchback. The other team gets it, and they start at the 25-yard line. Like, that's ridiculous. So that gets ditched here, and the offense just goes back, I think, to something like the 10-yard line, which is very sensible. The other one, no players move during the kickoff until the receiver or the kickoff returner catches it. And additionally, both teams are 5 yards apart on the receiving side of the end zone. So it's actually a very bizarre formation to watch, where it's just these two players staring at each other, almost like defensive and offensive lines, and they can't move until the receiver catches the ball. I think something like that actually is where football is headed. I think like the kick return is not long for this world.
It's the most dangerous play. Like the when we talk about like severe debilitating injuries that have occurred in college, a ton of them, I think maybe the majority have been on the kickoffs, because this is where you got two teams. They kept trying to move the teams closer and shorten the amount of space to like get up a good head of steam. But you have two teams of professional athletes like sprinting at each other dead on. And it is a tremendous amount of energy that is like unleashed.
One of the NFL plays that always takes my breath away is when someone's taking usually a punt, because and they're looking up at the sky, tracking this ball, and then you have the way the rules work is that you cannot touch that receiver until they catch the ball. The moment they have the ball, anything is possible. And the amount of times you watch a guy having sprinted like 3/4 of the field, a full head of steam, and just directly connects a crushing hit right as the carrier catches that ball, like that doesn't feel right. It does not feel fair to the player who is catching it, because look, if you just want them to say fair catch and not sprint it out, well then just make the rules where you can't run the ball out and let's start everything at the 25-yard line. Or you do something like this where you have minimized speed in the return. There's still an opportunity for a line to create a hole. Essentially it becomes a running play. It's like, can you just do a quick running play with these special team players? I think that's where it's going. I don't think they'll ever outlaw it. I think, again, kind of like the field goal, it's going to stick around in some realm, but something like this does seem to make a lot of sense. The other one is onside kicks exist, but it is also possible if you are a team trailing in the fourth quarter to, instead of kicking the ball off and potentially doing an onside kick, you can do a 4th and 15 play and try and maintain possession, which is hard. Like going 15 yards on 4th down is difficult to do. But it was done in one of the games over the weekend. And again, I don't see the NFL adopting this, but this is the kind of stuff that is like a fun wrinkle on how games are otherwise played.
Yeah.
And the last one, which I think is probably the most relevant of any of these besides the kickoff, is that all calls and non-calls are reviewable as long as you have a timeout. Now, you can only do it once, and you have to have a timeout in order to exercise it. But for example, I think the fact that Bradbury admitted to the hold in the Super Bowl deflated a lot of the energy around that particular play and call, even if we both agree that it was a hold. That's why the player admitted it was a hold. But had the player not done that, because in the heat of the moment, in the heat of the loss, I can imagine him being like, no, like that wasn't a hold. And that drives a whole bunch of attention against refs, against players, against how the games are officiated. Not only could the Eagles have asked for a review on that, and then upon review in slow motion, it would have been very obvious it was a hold, and it would have we could have proceeded as follows. But in addition to that, when close calls are being reviewed, when any call is being reviewed in the XFL, they cut to the officials like in like the media truck or whatever with like the million screens, the million angles. They talk through what they're seeing, what they're not seeing, and when they make a call, they explain why the call is being made in like very easy to understand specific language. Like, we're at a place in the NFL where frequently it is unclear what is a catch, and the whole point of the sport is to catch a ball. And even if the rules have gotten extremely complicated, at the very least, it is nice to know. This is where like the conspiracy theories comes from. But I can also imagine a world where like, does the NFL kind of like that people get upset over the games and the calls?
Yeah.
Like, I think they do. I think that fuels a lot of attention and discussion around a game after the game is over. So, I think this is better for the sport, and better as a viewer. I could also imagine the NFL being like, fuck it. We actually the mystery is part of the fun. Elsewhere, we'll run through a couple of these real quick. You wanted to mention outside of the NFL, you linked me a piece called "Relegate Manchester United." Can you explain?
Nope.
You can't
so there's
explain
two
it?
Manchester teams.
Oh, Manchester City. Sorry.
Yes.
Manchester City.
Yes. So your theme.
What's the difference? Could just start there? What is the difference between Manchester City and Manchester United?
In terms of the history, I don't really know. People will write in. I'm sure this inspires a lot of passion, but I will say this.
Mm-hmm.
So Manchester United, I think, was sort of the iconic team of the transformation of British Premier League into a global sport.
Wait, Manchester City, you mean?
No. Manchester United.
I'm just making sure that we're using that.
Let me ask you. You know who Wayne Rooney is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Like he was Manchester United's star player, and like, the red jerseys, all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Manchester United was like kind of the the face of that league in a lot of ways, as Premier League sort of became a major international sport. And for a long time, like, they were incredibly well financed, and a bit like, the old school Yankees were in baseball. Manchester City, historically, I think, was kind of they weren't they were the Mets, right? So, like, if you had Man U over there, hoisting the banners and such, you had Man City, kind of like, well, I'm sure people in some neighborhoods like them, but it wasn't really a marquee franchise. And then, Man U declines a bit, but the big thing that happens is Manchester City is acquired. Manchester City is bought by, effectively, I think, like the royal family of Abu Dhabi. And so what that brings in, we've talked about this, we started asking people to write in about how there have been so many European soccer clubs that have been purchased by effectively like billionaires or like sovereign wealth funds or like oil sheiks and such like that, and it's caused salaries to explode. There's a lot of teams that are just like wildly well financed, and Manchester City is kind of the poster child for that, where like this went from being a club that was kind of historically nowhere and turned into a real powerhouse. And so over the past like decade, I think they've pretty much eclipsed, they've pretty much like eclipsed Man U and have been like one of the best teams in Premier League. And so people can write in to correct me about this. I'm curious because I have more questions than I do answers, but this is just, this just caught my eye. First of all, I've been watching a bit more football in general, and people have strong feelings about, I made the mistake of saying some very saying basically that Man City deserved to crush Nottingham Forest, because they did. Like Nottingham Forest played like shit and still got a tie in a way that I found really, really grating. But people really hated the thought of like cheering for Man City or thinking they deserved anything. And I think part of it is what I'm about to talk about.
This is also related to your arc with, was it Tottenham?
Yeah, Tottenham. I don't know fully how to pronounce that either. Is it Tottenham? Tottenham or Tottenham?
I don't know, but we did.
They're hot
Lawrence. Lawrence wrote in, Dear Sports, this is a part and passion plea with a question tied to my final point. Rob, please do not lead Patrick into being a Tottenham fan. I will say I am an Arsenal fan, so of course there's some bias here, but more importantly, the two of you deserve better. You deserve a team who can achieve anything. something. You deserve some joy. To be clear, I'm not suggesting Arsenal. I'm simply suggesting anyone else who isn't owned by a nation with questionable human rights records. I have many friends who are Tottenham fans. They are not happy friends. They have a deep and powerful sadness in their eyes. Plus, fuck that Barstool guy. He's the worst. To end on my question, Rob, Patrick, do you want to be happy or not? The choice is in your hands. All the best, Lawrence.
I definitely feel that. Arsenal's a lot of fun. I've been enjoying watching them quite a bit. But anyway, so Man City is like coming off this like decade of dominance. Tends to have a great team year in, year out. The other thing that happens across Europe is there are like national leagues that exist in Europe, but then there's like European tournaments where you'll have the best teams in the UK playing the best teams out of like Germany and such. But those are governed by different rules, and I gather that UEFA, the organization that oversees those tournaments, basically conducted an audit of Man City and found that Man City has, for years, been breaking the few rules that exist in soccer to enforce financial fair play. And from what I've been able to glean about this, and I think the best summary of it, if you don't know anything about this, is a piece, called Relegate Manchester City, that was published in the New Republic. But I thought, because so many teams seem to have done it, that it was totally legit for some wildly rich ownership group to come in and just say, you know what? We're going to sign all the best players. And then the players we don't sign to be our starters, we'll pay to put them on the bench. And you just sort of like buy your way in, and you buy your way to the top. Well, maybe it used to be like that, but it does seem like they've tried to institute something to change that, which is the teams have to sort of pay as they go. You might have billions of dollars to spend, but unless the team is bringing in like revenue to cover its player signings, then you can't do that. Like, you cannot just inject your capital into the team and like, transform the market. They've tried to sort of like, it still seems like you can probably inject quite a bit of money into the team, but the
idea is like to raise the floor of quality, or like, hey, run a good team that people want to watch and see and thrive. Thus, it'll make more money. Thus, you can play your players better.
And to a degree, like the Man City thing is like, I think concerned a lot of teams that were historically better, because it was like, this was not a good franchise. And then someone comes in and just through the sheer power of money, undoes years of like culture building across the rest of the league, and it's just sort of bought their seat at the top of the table. So it seems like this is still really porous, but even within those rules, Man City fucked up, because what they did was they signed bogus sponsorships to bring in revenue for the team that would enable them to bring in more money. And one of the ways they did that was like an Abu Dhabi telecom company became like their title sponsor effectively. Well, it's owned by the royal family of us, like owned by someone else, I think, in the royal family of that country, or someone well-connected. But the company didn't even send the money. Instead, the owner of Man City was like, oh, I'll cover their sponsorship as a loan. And so signs over out of their like checking account all the money of the sponsorship. And I guess like when the auditors saw that, they were like, well, that's not really a sponsorship. That's just you. Like, that's a company being like, we want to give this team $1 billion. And the guy being like, great, I'll just give them $1 billion and you can get me back sometime. And that breaches the rules because it's not a real sponsorship. It's not Man City bringing in that money like authentically. It is just basically the owner finding a way to launder their funds into the team's pockets and allow them to continue sort of overpaying for talent. So they get banned from like UEFA tournaments, I think, for a couple of years. But that also kicked off an investigation in Premier League. And this one also could have some pretty serious ramifications because it's the combination of people don't like these practices, but then there's also the fact that you have a decade of shaky paper trails and it looks like you were really trying to get away with something. And so it's unclear how this all unfolds. There is a possibility where, in American college football, there's the concept of like giving a program the death penalty, where you basically ban them from like all sorts of recruiting activities. You cut them out of the NCAA for a while, and you like kneecap their ability to recruit new talent because they've breached all these rules. Man City, it seems like they're at least dealing with the possibility that something like that could happen to them as well. And there's a lot of people who badly want to see it happen because already they're sort of the poster child for this phenomenon that's happened across European soccer. People show up, pour tons of capital into a team, completely blow up the market and transform the league. And it's just like, rather than, the team just is sort of buys its way, again, like to the top. So people already didn't like that. But if that is on top of that, they're kind of like fraudulently circumventing the few rules in place to prevent that. That really pisses a lot of people off. But I think even their ban from European soccer may have gotten overturned by like a higher court of appeals or like a higher arbitration body. So, money tends to will out. Like making punishment stick in these cases is really, really tough. But I guess the thing this piece lays out is UEFA had a very short timeline to figure out what was going on in Man City, right? It was like a quick audit, and it was like, this doesn't look right, in a swift action. Because a lot of these violations happened years ago, so there's a sunset on like how actionable they are. I think Premier League has more freedom to dig into this, and so it is possible that like more and more stuff keeps getting like coming to light, I guess, and it just doesn't look good for this program. And it not only calls into doubt like the better part of a decade of English football, but also really highlights how many of these powerhouses of this era are kind of Potemkin teams, right? Where it's like what you got behind it is some guys with checkbooks, but not really like an institution.
Or like a team building strategy,
right?
I mean, it's an argument in favor of it is like, as you pointed out earlier, the way the NFL does things, the way a lot of American sports leagues do things, like that have either a hard salary cap or a soft one that invokes something called in the NBA, I think it's called a luxury tax, which is basically you start paying penalties if you start paying over what the salary cap is. There are arguments in favor of that from a competitive standpoint, because then it forces teams to actually be strategic with their resources as opposed to just having the most expensive owner. Like, look, like the Cowboys may be, quote, America's football team, but they're dog shit a lot of the time. And like, it's because you have to also field a good football team and not just be obscenely rich. So that's interesting. The last one before we get to your questions, we both had noted this. This is not yes, we are both Chicago sports centric, but how do you think you pronounce Jonathan Taves? Yeah, I had to look that up. I was like, Taves. Jonathan Taves, a longtime leader on the, well, frankly, disgraced Chicago Blackhawks, but nonetheless, the captain of that team. This has been a team that's been on the verge of fully breaking up and rebuilding and exploding, completely separate from its moral and ethical lapses during its reign of dominance, about 10, 15 years ago. But this is Jonathan Taves has been essentially on the trade block. The trade deadline for the NHL is coming up, and has decided to ask not to be traded, and is attributing it to the fact that they are experiencing and dealing with the effects of long COVID. There was a statement that Taves put out. First of all, thank you to my fans. and all those who have shown concern about my absence. I'm still dealing with the symptoms of long COVID and chronic immune response syndrome. It has been really challenging to play through these symptoms. In the past few weeks, it has reached the point where I had no choice but to step back and concentrate on getting healthy. I am thankful for the patience and support of my teammates, the coaching staff, and the entire Blackhawks organization. And it's just really interesting to see a player talk about an issue like this. I think when COVID began and we watched sports leagues kind of just power through alongside different protocols, broadly what you would see was you'd see players come back and they'd be tired. You know, I remember Lamar Jackson contracting COVID and just not looking quite right for a couple weeks after, which makes sense for a running quarterback to have issues. But there really hasn't, to my mind, been a whole lot of broader discussion in MLB, in NBA, in NFL about players experiencing. There's like been increased discussions of players' mental health, right? I think that has come more to the forefront in recent years, and that's good and healthy. But like long COVID, you know, I think can sometimes feel like it's a thing you read about in articles or like people talking about on Twitter, and you don't have a good sense of what is the actual material impact that's having on everyday people, because statistically it's very easy to not know anyone that is experiencing those symptoms. But to watch like an all-star athlete come out and admit like, this is what's holding me back and I actually need to take a step back from playing, I thought was really interesting.
It's, yeah, like I have a lot of complicated feelings about the Blackhawks these days, for sure, for the reasons you alluded to. You know, people don't know we're talking about the early on in their sort of mini dynasty, like over a decade ago at this point, there was like an incident of sexual abuse that happened within the organization, and they sort of looked the other way and sort of got the abuser out of there and sort of hushed the entire thing up. And that person went on to assault some other people in I think a junior league team. But this is not like hockey, like a lot of sports where there are a lot of young players and then adults who get access to them. You know, abuse scandals do tend to follow. The Blackhawks are not like unique in this. Like Hockey Canada has a much wider and deeper set of scandals associated with this, but it does sort of mean that the Blackhawks, like pretty explicitly, you know, back in the day, put their championship run ahead of like hitting pause and doing the right thing and standing up for a victim. But setting that off to the side for a moment, the thing I see when I see a thing like this, I guess a bit selfishly, I don't want to say like it's good that this is happening, but I think there are a lot of folks who don't understand what people are talking about when they talk about long COVID, that they do not really believe that this can be a thing. And there's this whole, you know, we talk about like autoimmune diseases. Like it's a really weird and poorly understood and frankly scary category of diseases. And a lot of times like the catalyzing factor for what caused it is not always clear. And COVID appears to be one of those like reagents where COVID can just sort of unleash things in your system that have a variety of weird symptoms and debilitating effects. And that isn't really, it takes a bunch of different forms. For a lot of people, maybe they just have the experience of COVID where I didn't even feel sick and they're fine forever. Some people have like these sort of long tail effects. So when you have someone like Taves, who his reputation has always been that he's like the hardest worker on the team, somebody who lives to play hockey, just an incredible athlete, incredible work ethic. When you get someone like him who's like, I can't beat this. I can't power through it. I can't do this. There's no digging deep or active will I can perform to overcome this. I just need to stop until I can hopefully come to grips with these symptoms and come to grips with this condition. And maybe it gets better. But when you have it happen to someone like this, I think it can be really eye-opening for people to understand that, like, this is somebody who is in peak physical condition, has never
access
had
to the best medical resources that money and organizations can buy, right? Like, I mean, this is a premier.
Never had a hint of the like other infirmities that were sort of dogging them, and here it is possible. You know, the Athletic Blackhawks reporter wrote a piece that basically, like, you know, this is not about his playing career. This is about like what his quality of life is at this point. Moving forward, we are hoping that he can recover and continue to do the thing he's best at. But like, it sounds like it's beyond even that, right? And if you learn about people who develop things like chronic fatigue or like various autoimmune diseases, these are incredibly eerie conditions that entire community of disabled people who suffer from conditions like this. One of the real pain points is that it's not visible. You don't look infirm. You don't look weak. And there is a lot of, in addition to the fact that a lot of people are like deeply ashamed about things like this, there is a strong sense that, you know, there is not a lot of sympathy out in the world for them and a lot of understanding out in the world for them. And, you know, that there's
alongside just a general exhaustion with COVID, right? With a lot of people just wanting to even people who took it seriously for X amount of time or just don't want to think about it anymore, don't want to talk about it anymore. And so I think that is just compounding, you know, a situation where folks who are working through or trying to work through situations like this it's easy to ignore them. Oh, a statistical outlier. And also I just don't want to think about it anymore.
Right. As it's sort of been with like, I mean, like Lyme disease is probably the most famous example of stuff like this, where it's a massive, you know, population of people who've had like these knock-on symptoms from this infection that can be really like disabling. And the response to that has mostly been to shrug, right? Like sucks for you, but we don't care that much about Lyme disease. And we're not going to like give you much in the way of accommodations, right? Like the things that are needed to deal with things like this are not easily offered by employers, right? Who are sort of the, you know, ultimately, because we don't have a social safety net, it's like you're kind of at the mercy of, are your employers going to be cool with it? And for most jobs, people are not going to be cool with something where the symptoms are, there's just a lot of days where randomly you can't work or you feel like
or it's up to a point, right? Like, hey, you get X amount of support until like, hey, this doesn't make sense anymore.
And to a point, like it's, you know, there's a lot of jobs where that isn't going to fly. It's just not workable. Right. In terms of like having a person who has that pattern. And the problem is there's no options beyond that except to deal with like the American disability system, which has sort of forms of enforced poverty. But that's a different conversation. But when I look at a story like this, it is just a reminder that like, yes, there's a lot of COVID fatigue. People have like lost interest in it, and you know, part of that is politically driven. But I think even well-meaning people have tended to get like kind of casual about all of this, and it's like you don't know what this is going to do. There's a lot of reasons you don't want this thing, and this is one of them. It's like I was sick for a month, and it sucked. I didn't like it at all. I feel fine. Hopefully, I stay feeling fine. But I would take that over years of feeling like this in a heartbeat.
It's a roll of the dice. You just don't know, you know, and you may, unfortunately, given the situation we now find ourselves in, not have much of a choice, no matter how safe you are. But every time you get it, you're rolling the dice, and like I'd rather not roll them.
Yep.
There's a reason my bets are $1, Rob. Like I'm not you know, I try to limit my risk. Let's get to some questions. You can send questions to gamingadvice.com with the title sports. Otherwise, so we always tweet out a link with a document where people can submit questions to for us to read on the podcast. This first one comes in unsigned, anonymous. Can you do me a favor real quick and look up Boomer, the former mascot for the Columbus Blue Jackets? He has been unfairly maligned for his phallic resemblance, and we need a grassroots effort to bring him back. So I'm looking up Boomer for the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Oh.
Boomer?
No, Boomer's fine.
He looks like a beer bottle.
The little cannon thing is very funny.
Petition to bring Boomer back. This is from when do I have a date on here? Change.org, where all things change. Boomer the Cannon appeared as a secondary mascot for the Columbus Blue Jackets in November 2010 for the 10th anniversary. Unfortunately, that club gave him the axe shortly thereafter. This may be literal as rumor is that they buried him in the Scottial River near the arena. Since then, Boomer's legend has grown to the point where there are many followers of his greatness. These followers believe he was erroneously targeted by fans of Stinger who said terrible things about Boomer. As a loyal fan, I believe that Boomer should be reborn as the newest part of the Blue Jacket franchise. It's been long enough without Boomer's presence at Nationwide Arena. Please sign and share this petition to bring back Boomer.
Oh, look up Stinger. So there's 2 mascots, and the theory is that they're Joker-fied Kermit mascot. Like, had it in for the cute little mustachioed cannon.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with Boomer.
Yeah. Bring Boomer back.
I was looking for the phallic. Like any write-ups about?
I mean, it's just like, it's a cannon. So it's like, it's a shaft with a mouth, but like, it's not particularly.
I'm with it. I'll sign the Boomer petition.
Yeah.
Let's go. Jenna from Appleton, Wisconsin.
Hey,
hi, Patrick
Appleton.
and Rob. Where is Appleton? Where is that? I've heard of
just
it.
south of Green Bay. That's where.
Oh wow,
that's where Lawrence University is. That's where I went to college.
Jenna, you are getting a shitload of snow right now. I hope you're okay. You are in the, as the news was putting it, impossible conditions. Getting 2 feet of snow and 50-mile-per-hour winds. So I hope things are safe up there in Appleton. I, like many other NFL fans, I'm sure, have found myself aimless and adrift following the end of the season. Craving some of the structure the games provided my evenings, I found comfort in an unexpected place: professional wrestling. On a whim, I put on one of the WWE events a few weeks ago, and to my surprise, really enjoyed it. Even more surprising was my partner enjoying it. To quote her, quote, "This is so fucking dumb. I love it." Because we're both nerds who enjoy analysis, we talked for a bit about why we enjoyed the event so much, and both realized that the biggest reason we had as much fun as we did was the commentary. That got me thinking about the importance of commentary in sports and sports entertainment. To that end, I was wondering if you had any favorite commentators across sports writ large, or any favorite commentary moments. Has commentary ever made or broken your enjoyment of a particular event? Love the show. Fuck capitalism. Go Pack Go. Oh, fuck you, Jenna. It was good though. You got me.
God, there's so great commentators become such a part of it. I know that.
Are you pro or anti Joe Buck? I'm pro Joe Buck.
I'm pro Joe Buck. I like Joe Buck.
I love Joe Buck. Like Joe. I get why people don't like him, but he's fun. Like, can seemingly speak to any sport, and the enthusiasm. He works for me.
If you are a Joe Buck fan, have you ever looked up clips from his short-lived HBO talk show?
No.
Hang on, I need to find this for you. We'll talk. Okay, look up Joe Buck, Artie Lang. We'll take this. This might be a thing we need to watch, like on a stream or something. But Joe Buck had a short-lived talk show on HBO, and the pitch was, "Hey, people, Joe Buck's interesting. He's a smart guy.
Right.
It's going to be him talking to cool people." And then Artie Lang showed up and roasted him mercilessly. Talk about what a Nepo baby is, because Joe Buck is like sports commentary, second generation. But just blew up the entire concept of the show. It's one of the most excruciating things I've ever watched, but it's riveting.
Wow.
Wow. So it's very funny. But that's a bit of Joe Buck lore that you need to familiarize yourself with. But I like Joe Buck. So he got dragged quite a bit in these playoffs, but I'm ride or die for Al Michaels. And people were like, "Oh, his commentary sucked during the playoffs." That's because he was paired with Tony Dungy. Like, Tony Dungy,
so bad.
There's not a room he cannot take the air out of. And this is setting aside the history of evangelical transphobic conservatism that just he exudes. He's just toxic as a sports personality. He may have been a great football coach, but he's boring as hell. hear talk about it. And so Al Michaels was basically flying solo for a game with the most boring man in sports. And so I don't hold that against him, but I like sort of his dry, like acerbicness, I guess is the way I put it. For me, one of the gold standards was, do you remember Doc Emmerich, who did a lot of hockey coverage for NBC?
Yeah, the name rings a bell.
Just a terrific and charming sports commentator who had one of the best play-by-play styles I've ever heard. And yeah, just a national treasure. Like, what was one of those things where even if the game he was calling wasn't interesting, it was just such a joy to sort of like listen to him work.
Well, what's interesting is, predominantly the sport I like pay attention to the most is football, in which the commentators mean the least, because I appreciate that I like that there is something to fill the air around the game, but I don't usually need something explained to me. I know what's going on. It's more the commentators exist to fill a space as the sport is occurring. Whereas sports like basketball and baseball, which for me are very infrequently sports that I am sitting down to watch. They are usually sports that are on in the background, right? So like the Bulls are frequently playing like while I'm cooking dinner, and the kids are eating their dinner and they're on their tablets. The Cubs are often playing during the day, and so that'll just be on in the background. And so something that I have noticed over time, like one of the longtime Cubs like color commentators left to go do the same thing for the White Sox. Couldn't tell you his name, but if I heard his voice, I could tell you that I missed it. And that has been an interesting part about watching a lot of Cubs and Bulls games over the last 5 years, is like one of the Bulls commentators who does a lot of the local NBC Sports ones. Like one of the things he said is like, when there's a good play, it's like, oh, bang, bang, bang. And I have heard myself saying around the house if something good happens, I'm like, oh, bang, bang, bang. And it's one of those things where I can't give you names. I could look them up, but it's sort of irrelevant because the presence they have in my life is just, I associate their voices with the games I am listening to frequently when I am not watching, and they are the context clues for like what is happening in the game. And so I appreciate good local sports commentators a lot. I tend to have like stronger opinions on them because they have more of an impact on my watching and appreciation of the game, especially because I'm watching occasional other NBA games. I'm watching occasional other baseball games, but usually I'm watching the Cubs or I'm watching the Bulls.
Yeah.
And the Bulls suck right now. They're terrible. They're garbage. And I still watch a chunk of most of the games. And the only reason that's going to be entertaining, other than, I don't know, a DeMar DeRozan pulling off an interesting play or screaming at Zach LaVine for taking an ill-advised three, is the commentators being interesting. And so they take on additional weight, especially for these long-running sports that don't have 16, 17, 18 games. They're 100 plus. And there's such an ebb and flow to these seasons in which frequently the games are inconsequential. It's just an ebb or a flow, even for a good team. And so those commentators just become all the more important, especially for the regional stuff.
It always felt to me like the NBA bubble was a looking glass that NBA commentary passed through. It's never quite been the same since. Like, I hear NBA game calls now, and they are the most podcast-shaped game commentaries of any league I have ever heard. Like, Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson are chatting, and incidentally, a game is happening in the background. If it's a good game, they'll tune in. They're like, I love Jeff Van Gundy. I really do. I love his commentary. But like, he's a fun personality. But for the most part, and this is true of a lot of NBA calls, it is now just like people chatting. And if the game like gets tight, they'll tune back into it. But like, it is a strange phenomenon because it's so alien to what it used to be. But for me, it started to feel like it was changing during the COVID bubble because there were so many games to call in a short time, and like there wasn't that much to talk about because it was all compressed, and so it just got really like.
It was a lot of the same commentators.
Yeah, self-referential,
right?
and like just, as we were talking about just the other day, let's keep going, let's keep chatting. But like like basketball commentary feels different to me now than a lot of other like a lot of other commentary. But yeah, it's I think sports need good commentators like this, because there's going to be a lot of like games that are supposed to be good that just end up sucking, and you're going to need someone who can make that an enjoyable experience. And there's people who hate like all commentary. They hate like commentators having any sort of flair.
It's all about the Manning cast, right?
Yeah.
Like frequently they're watching bad games.
Yep.
And yet, and the worst parts of the Manning cast are when they bring guests on, because I'm not there to watch them interview Barack Obama. Like, I'm there to watch.
No, but like I was there if they're talking to like Shannon Sharp. Like if they're talking to like other ex-players who like also don't get to let their hair down like that very often, that can be a lot of fun.
It's just great because you like when what I love about that is because they do let their hair down more, in the sense of like when a coach uses a timeout improperly, like Peyton Manning is just like and it's like that's the feeling we're all having, that is so restrained by the normal commentators who are a little more straight-laced or like require extraordinary things to happen in order for them to get emotional. And I just love a little bit more of like Peyton especially just getting just really mad at like basic shit going wrong, the kind of thing that you're yelling at your TV screen about. And the fact that you see their faces the entire time, right? I think that is a fundamental difference between that broadcast and your standard sort of commentator broadcast, in which they are just a broadly an audio thing, except for when they cut away. In the Manning cast, they always have them on, so there's kind of more of a physicality and performative element to what they're doing that just isn't present in other broadcasts, because they like the visual element sort of disappears behind the game. What I'm saying is I wish they were on more. And you know what? They want to bring the Manning cast to other sports. Fine. I'll listen to Peyton Manning talk about the Bulls. Be more interesting than the games that are happening. Related, Corey from Knoxville asked, "Hey y'all, do either of you have any sort of affinity for sports talk radio? For me, local sports talk call-in shows are comedy gold, especially after a big loss, and are a must listen. Fuck capitalism. Go Vols? 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 Who are the Vols?
I forget which college team they are.
Okay. Well, I have no affinity for sports talk radio. I think maybe some of that is not having a commute and the advent of podcasting. It's like I'd rather just listen to two smart analysts talk for 45 minutes about a particular topic, as opposed to just endless ranting about the thing of the day. But I don't know. Have you had any experience or affinity for sports talk?
I mean,
yeah.
I grew up in Chicagoland. Like we've talked
670
before
the
about
score, baby.
Yeah, you listen to the score. You listen to all the old Bears players. Just go through different stages of grief every week. You know, you tune in and you'd see like is Doug Buffone going to make a death threat on the air this week? That would be that might be fun to listen to. Ed Abradovich is losing his shit. Like it was great. Like sports. Here's the weird thing. Like for me, I think like a lot of podcasts fill the niche that sports talk radio does or did.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But there is something different about sports talk radio. I think part of it is because it is such a long, like even by podcast standards, it is a long form entertainment. It's actually closer like to Twitch streaming in some ways.
Well, it's also like, what do you want, right? When I listen to a sports podcast, it's usually people being like measured, like sports analysis. Like we have a question coming up about people asking about sports writing and reporting. Like I think the bar is just like so much higher on that these days, broadly speaking. Like, you know, you've got folks like the Mina Kimes of the world, and it's just like, just incredibly smart people speaking very intellectually and philosophically and like have data to show about what's happening on the field. Sports radio is like, man, fuck the Bears. Like, fuck them. Like fire Nagy. Like, they're not going to say that on the podcast, right? Like, but on sports radio, I'm going to get a little more of that energy. And so it's like, what are you there for? Are you there to learn something about the game? Or are you there to just go through an emotional experience as a fan? Because that's more of what sports radio fills.
And they have their like community of callers that eventually like there's some people that just get sort of waved through. Like this person calls in, just wave them through. They're going to come because they're good on the radio. They're fun questioners. So yeah, that is like that's part of the appeal. So I love sports talk radio. Podcasts have kind of like taken that time and that form of entertainment for me. Between podcasts and like watching the sports, I don't have a lot of time to like tune into sports talk radio, but like it does have a very special place in my heart, and I miss it quite a bit. Apparently the Vols are short for the Volunteers for Tennessee, which is very, very funny.
This one comes in from Callum. Hey, ball pointers. That's good. I've been loving the sports podcast. I've been really enjoying hearing you guys discuss the ins and outs of the NFL and sports fandom at large. I was always one of those guys that didn't like sports growing up. It wasn't big in my family, and the people around me at school that were into sports weren't really in my friendship circle. Since discovering F1, thanks, Rob. Shout out to Shift F1. You can to patreon.com/Shift F1.
Oh God, I think there might actually be a hyphen in there.
I'm going to let you look that up. I found out that I also really like watching NASCAR and Australia's motorsports jewel, the supercars. I also devoured the Welcome to Wrexham series in one haze of a weekend. I've heard you guys discuss the world of sports writing and journalism from time to time prior to the Sports Pod. As someone who wants to dive deeper into the world of quality sports writing, can you recommend any outlets that you'd consider to be essential reading? Much love forever, Callum. Before we answer this, did you get an answer to your link?
Yeah, it's patreon.com/shiftf1. Yeah. And great time to look that podcast up because I forgot this is happening. We are like a week away from the season starting.
You just published I saw Danny primer. Published a link to a 2.5 hour video in which Drew Scanlon prefaces it going, so this is going to be long and there's too much information and you're not going to remember most of it. Don't sweat it. We're just getting started.
Yeah. Okay. Every season we do the like, hey, here, like assuming you know nothing about F1, but you're curious, we are going to talk through the various aspects of it. And so it is.
We can do that this year for football, Rob. Oh, that'd be fun.
Absolutely. So that's what we put out, and then we resume our regular programming.
For me, especially Callum, as someone that is maybe like relatively new to sports, but is interested in reading good sports writing, I do not think there is a better value out there than The Athletic. They are a sports publication that was acquired by the New York Times a year or two back.
It's vastly higher editorial standards than the New York Times. Like The Athletic is so much better an outlet. And
yet, the way that you should acquire The Athletic is not by paying for The Athletic, but by going to the New York Times and paying for the New York Times. I
can't believe
that gets you access to The Athletic, because paying for The Athletic does not necessarily get you access to the New York Times.
Those pieces of shit haven't I don't get my New York Times subscription. And if that means the money only goes to The Athletic, then I can live with that.
Yes.
If I'm not funding their dog shit,
opinion page, I get it.
Yeah.
I fully get where you're coming from. And I was for years I've paid for The Athletic almost since the beginning. Even as their prices went up to $60-$80 a year. Like the thing that's great about The Athletic is you're not just paying for Chicago sports, you can read about the Bears, but they have beat reporters assigned to not every team, but almost every team in all sorts of leagues. So if you want to read about soccer, it's like I just pull up the Athletic app and I can pull up a bunch of really well-informed analysis reporting. They also have national writers and local writers. So if you don't actually want to know about a specific team, but just want to broadly know what's going on in a sport, they have you covered there as well. It's just, if you're looking to just get into sports and want good writing, they also have podcasts associated with almost any of those teams. It's just a really great all-encompassing spot. And as Rob said, it's a much higher standard than a lot of the national papers.
And it's also one of the last good reading experiences out there. Now they've just added ads, but there's not many of them, and they're not too obtrusive, at least so far. Knock on wood, it stays that way. But for a long time they were ad free, and it is wild when you open up the Athletic app and you're like, oh, a readable news website on mobile. Because
in 2023,
when you allude to national papers that are not the New York Times, by and large, their websites are terrible. Local TV stations have even worse websites. It is terrible ads, nothing but around the web links, at the footer of every article. It just it makes everything ugly, hard to read, unnavigable, etc. And so that's one of the other big advantages of The Athletic. It is a shame because I think like local news in general is crisis, but local sports writing is like one of the treasures of that sort of institution. And a lot of that stuff now is locked behind ineffectual like paywalls, where it's like, I'm sorry, I'm not feeding my email or signing up for this like local regional paper.
Or a lot's becoming nationalized, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about this in the past, there is a huge difference between being a beat reporter and a national reporter when it comes to covering a team or a sport. And there will be something incalculably lost if everything becomes nationalized, because what gets focused on is like the good teams. And I like the fact that even when my teams are bad, there are people who are trying to understand what the team is trying to accomplish, why they are failing, what could go differently. And that is especially true when you have personal and emotional attachment to a regional team. Like I can't just switch, right? Like, so if no one's writing about the Bears, there's just nothing to read about the Bears. And so that's where local beat reporters, and a lot of this is switching to subscription models, right? Like there's, CHGO is like they're part of like a network of websites that like are out of different hubs that are like sports centric cities. It's sports media is going through similar upheavals that lots of other media is going through. And The Athletic for a while was like this kind of shining beacon of, we can cover it all, we can do it all, and we can make money. I don't know if that last part was actually true, because I think the part was like, I don't know if their model was sustainable, but hopefully the New York Times doesn't mess with what they're doing too much, and just it becomes part of their broader entertainment portfolio that they're doing with things like Wordle. Because if we lost it, you'd be losing. I mean, just there's a shitload of writers that make a good living there. I would like them to keep making a good living, to keep doing good stuff. So that is my recommendation. And let's see, let's pick one of these to close out on. This is interesting because I'm curious if we can this kind of close the loop on a stream that you and I did with Kato a little while back. Not really a sports question, but I'm canceling YouTube TV now that the football season is over. $70 a month back in my pocket. Adam from Metro Detroit. I mostly use this to ask, a couple of weeks in, how your YouTube TV experience is going. And now that football is over, is it something you're going to maintain past the 3 months of a reduced discount? I just got my email that is, hey, you're about to pay full price. You're out of your 3-month discount range. And I did find myself last night when, like, we're in the All-Star break, so there wasn't even like a basketball game to put on. I was like, I don't want to watch Wheel of Fortune. Am I paying $70 a month to have Wheel of Fortune on in the background? I'm going to keep it for another month and see where we're at. But I might be in a spot that Adam from Detroit is in. And I'm curious where you're at, Rob.
Yeah, I think, so the thing for me is I'm like into...
You're into enough things that it sounds like you're going to be able to justify it in a way that, I'll
right,
keep
like give it a couple days. There's going to be basketball games I care about now. Like, like the...
And then baseball's going to start again. So I'll probably find my justification.
And like, I don't follow basketball very well for the first half of the season, but after the All-Star break, I tend to tune in a bit more. The games feel a little more meaningful. And I do enjoy the playoffs a lot. So it's stuff like that. Now, I will say, like, League Pass is a pretty good deal in basketball. If I wanted to watch F1, their F1 TV like package is also pretty good. So all these things probably would be, and then toss in Peacock there to cover other motorsports and like soccer. And suddenly there's not a ton of like things that are exclusive to TV that I need to watch, but it's a pretty good interface. It's unbalanced. Like I do find it's the thing is, rather than having to see like, okay, right, I need to go to Peacock to navigate to the games I want to see there. It's very easy to just open up YouTube TV, go to the events I bookmarked, and there it all is. And that saves me some time and like just mental overhead where it's like, I don't know what sport I'm going to watch just yet, but I'm going to see what like I have in the tank, and there it is. And so that is like, it makes it like that part seamless, and so I'm probably keeping it on the strength of that.
Yeah. All right, well, that is going to do it for sports. Again, you can write in questions to gamingadvice.com with the subject head sports, or keep abreast of Twitter, and we will post a link to a document you can drop these into. In the meantime, you can follow Waypoint on Twitter at Waypoint, on Twitch at twitch.tv/Waypoint, on YouTube at youtube.com/WaypointVice, and our writing at waypoint.vice.com. This episode is premiering ad-free on Waypoint Plus, which you can subscribe to and gain access to early episodes, ad-free episodes, exclusive episodes, and more at waypointplus.com. We're still figuring out what is the sports podcast in the like NFL off-season era. Feel free to write in if you have any ideas or suggestions as we kind of figure out the shape of things going forward. I'm not sure we're going to do another XFL check-in, and the USFL is in April. So, one of the ideas I had was maybe picking a sport and like Rob, let's subscribe to ESPN Plus and then find the weirdest sport possible we can watch on there and then get really into it for a week, is an idea I had. So if you have an idea, please let us know what you think would be fun as we wait for the NFL offseason to grind through, get closer to kind of free agency and the draft, where we got some more stuff to chew on.
You sound just really like you're not champing at the bit to get into basketball in the next. Did the Bulls ruin it? Like, did the wind get taken under sails? Like,
dude, they're so bad.
But hey, once Caruso and Ball are healthy, right? Like,
no, he's been ruled out for the season. Ball's not coming.
No,
back.
But like next year, Yeah,
next year. Even if they're bad, we gave that part of the Vucevic trade was giving away our first round draft pick, and there's like a historic player coming in next season that if we were tanking, we'd have a chance at. But now, even if we tanked, we'd have a 50% chance of losing that draft pick to the Orlando Magic. I'll find the energy. I'll find a lane in the playoffs when we get closer. But right now, it's bad. Until then, you can follow me on Twitter at Patrick Klubik. Rob, where can people follow you?
Well, until the account is hijacked for lack of two-factor authentication, I'm at Rob Zachney.
Fuck capitalism and bear down.